The desert doesn't forgive. Not the heat, not the silence, and certainly not the secrets you bury in its sands. In the summer of 1995, the sky over Loma Alta shimmered like molten glass. The air tasted of dust and something bitter, something metallic. Rachel Prescott adjusted her campaign hat, her hands trembling just enough that she gripped the steering wheel tighter. The radio crackled to life. Unit 4207, confirm inspection location. She swallowed hard. 4207, confirming vehicle inspection at Culvert 73, south of Checkpoint Charlie. Over. Silence answered her back. She waited for the static to resolve into a voice. It didn't. Rachel glanced at her rearview mirror. Nothing but an empty wash and the faint mirage of the fence line far behind her. She checked the clock on the dash. 18:42. 4 minutes later, the radio sputtered again. But this time, her own voice sounded foreign in her ears as she pressed the button. Dispatch! No reply. That was the last time anyone heard from a Rachel Prescott. 11 years later, the desert looked the same, but it wasn't. At least not to Dana Reich. The monsoon had torn through last week, carving deep scars through the borderlands. From the air, they looked like veins etched into the earth, dark and dangerous. Dana sat stiff in the cockpit of the DHS chopper as it banked low over Sector D12. The pilot, Tom Heron, leaned forward and pointed toward a collapsed drainage gully below. You seeing that? At first she didn't. Then it caught the sun, faint, dull, unmistakably metallic. A roof rack, half buried in the sand, tilting at an unnatural angle. Dispatch, this is Airwatch 27. Heron called into the headset. Visual on a buried unit near mile marker 81. Door code appears to read 207, requesting ground confirmation. Dana closed her eyes briefly. 207. Her breath hitched, but she didn't let it show. By the time she stepped out of her Tahoe at the site, the perimeter had already been taped off with DHS orange. Sun-bleached uniforms scattered around the gully like pale ghosts. The vehicle was barely recognizable, the front end tilted into the earth, the rear half swallowed by years of silt and monsoon debris. Its green paint was muted under layers of dust. But there it was, Unit 4207. A backhoe stood idle nearby. 2 field techs crouched near the tailgate, their hands gloved, their faces unreadable. One of them traced faded numbers with a finger. Dana heard the voice before she saw him. Didn't expect to see you here, Superintendent Brewer said. She didn't turn toward him. They called me, she replied. I didn't volunteer. He made a noise that could have been a laugh or a warning. The rear doors groaned when they finally forced them open. A brittle hiss of dust escaped, dry and cold. Dana raised her scarf over her mouth and leaned in. Dark stains streaked the interior, brown and flaked like dried paint. The cargo liner had curled and split. On the floor, the remains of a Border Patrol logbook, warped with humidity, sat under the fractured dashboard. This is blood, a tech said, too degraded to say how much, but enough to know it didn't belong there. No animal tracks, no struggle, just time and silence. Brewer stood behind her, arms crossed, watching. It's just a fossil, he muttered. Probably an old repo unit washed off the road back in the day. Dana finally turned to look him in the eye. It was still active when it disappeared, she said. Brewer didn't answer. They catalogued everything piece by piece. A sidearm, magazine half empty, 3 rounds missing. The radio mic, frayed and snapped, keys still in the ignition. And in the glove box, a sun-warped notebook. Faded ink. Prescott R. Dana traced the name with a gloved fingertip. Brewer leaned closer, lowering his voice. You really want to stir this up? She didn't look at him. This wasn't a flood. Her words hung between them. The radio was broken. The gun was drawn. The blood was in the back. You think she abandoned her post and dumped her own truck? Brewer's nostrils flared as he exhaled and looked away. Later, as they hauled the Suburban out of its shallow grave and winched it onto a flatbed, Dana stood alone at the edge of the cordon. She could hear the whisper of sand blowing across the exposed undercarriage, the faint clink of chains tightening. The setting sun bled orange over the horizon. One of the junior techs approached, holding a small evidence bag. "There's an ID number scratched into the back of the notebook," he said. "Not sure what it is. Case file? Radio call. Mark it and copy it," Dana replied quietly. "Everything goes to evidence in Laredo." The tech nodded and left. Dana walked back to the vehicle one last time. One of the rear doors hung slightly ajar. She reached out and braced her hand against the frame, leaning close enough to feel the stale breath of air escaping from inside. It smelled of old paper and something else, something she couldn't name. That night, Dana sat in the dim archive room at the Laredo field office, her elbows on the table, the notebook open before her. On the first page, scrawled faintly in blue ink, Rachel Prescott. The date stopped abruptly mid-June. The final entry only half legible, her last words before silence. Dana turned the page, her eyes catching on the scratched number etched into the back cover. A number that didn't match any of the dispatch codes she knew, something buried deeper this hand. She closed the notebook and whispered to herself, "This isn't over." The file on Rachel Prescott lay right under her hand, strangely thin. Could a person's disappearance really be explained with so little paper? Dana leaned closer to the desk lamp in the archives room in Laredo. She flipped through the file with her fingertips. Only 4 pages. A hiring form, patrol route, the shift schedule for the day she vanished, and a resignation letter. That's what it said. But Dana didn't believe it for a second. "You want to see Rachel's patrol route?" The clerk behind the glass looked at her suspiciously as he shuffled through files. The nameplate read Sweeney. "Yes," Dana said, unblinking. "June 17th, 1995, Sector J, Loma Alta." Sweeney snorted through his nose and turned to the cabinet. A minute later, he handed over a slim file. "That's it," he said indifferently. "Most of it's on microfiche, but that one's been sitting untouched for years." Dana opened it. The contents were indeed sparse, as if someone had carefully hollowed it out. "Where's the patrol route?" she asked. Sweeney shrugged. "Detailed shift rosters are in a different archive," he said. "You'll have to file a request there, but fair warning, pre-95 requests clog the system. They usually get denied." That night, Dana sat alone in the archives room. In one hand, she held Rachel's shift notes. In the other, the printout of the sector radio logs. The last recorded transmission from Rachel came at 1842. "Unit 4207 reporting vehicle inspection at Culvert 73 south of Checkpoint Charlie." Then silence. No response. No call for help. Just gone. Dana tracked down Westbrook, an old field agent. He was leaning on a counter in a dingy tire shop in Roma, hands greasy and tired. "Do you remember Rachel?" Dana asked, showing him the file. The man nodded. "I remember," he said. "She was young, quiet, didn't drink, didn't gossip, just did her rounds. But the day she disappeared, her route was changed." "Why was it changed?" He shook his head. "Don't know," Westbrook said. "Assignments were written by hand back then. That week's dispatch was Sanders." Dana froze. "Calvin Sanders?" The man nodded. "Yeah, quiet type, transferred out later." When Dana reviewed the file for that week, every shift schedule bore Sanders' signature at the bottom. Rachel's vehicle had been moved 2 miles south of her usual patrol. No explanation. The knot in Dana's chest tightened. It couldn't all be coincidence. 2 floors down, in the dim archives, a young analyst led Dana to the metal cabinets. "There's a problem with the summer 95 tapes," she said. "What kind of problem?" "Heat damage," the woman replied. "Most of the reels on the Q3 95 shelf are unreadable, especially sectors J and K. The others were salvaged. Rachel's last known location was in Sector J. Dana's fingers traced the cold metal slowly. "Can I have the serial numbers of the damaged tapes?" she asked. The young woman scribbled a few numbers into a small notebook and handed it over. Dana took it, thanked her, but the suspicion in her gut was almost solid now. That night, in her motel room, she spread the papers across the bed. Rachel's final radio call, the burned tapes, the schedules, the rerouted patrol, the missing weapon, and the fake resignation letter sent to her family. None of it added up. Rachel Prescott hadn't disappeared of her own accord, and someone didn't want that known. As Dana shuffled through old records, she found a witness form wedged behind the wrong file. The letters were bold. Border Patrol SUV slowed along the west fence line. A black unmarked SUV pulled up behind it. Observation time, approx 20 minutes. Black vehicle waited, then followed. Signed, H. Galvin, Ranch 43. That name appeared nowhere in the official reports. The next day, Dana went to Galvin's house. The old man sat on his porch, his face lined with years of weariness. "First time in 11 years someone's come to ask," he said. "I told them what I saw, but they said it was inappropriate." "What did you see?" The man's hands trembled as he spoke. A BP vehicle passed slowly. Then a black, unmarked SUV came behind it, waited a long time, then followed. It wasn't right. "Who did you tell?" "The office. Don't recall his name. Quiet guy." "Sanders?" "Yes, that's him." When she got back, she learned Rachel's missing weapon had been destroyed under standard procedure in '99. Even the box was gone from the archive. In another drawer, Dana found a scrap of paper in a familiar handwriting, a terse note. "Suspected misconduct. No official record. If not investigated, I'll come in person." No signature, but the handwriting matched Rachel's own field notes. That night, as Dana reviewed the papers again in her motel room, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was low, rough. "Low Negro," the man said. "Not the cartel. Someone else was waiting." "Who?" Dana asked. The line went dead. Dana slowly raised her head, eyes fixed on the darkness, and she couldn't silence the voice inside. Someone planned everything to silence her. But it wasn't over yet, and Dana was ready to go all the way. Dana's mind was locked on the red circle on the map under the dim motel room light. Relay 9. So much blood, doubt, and lies had piled up on that name that every other mark on the map looked blurry now. But within that blur, something had finally sharpened into focus. At the end of this line, there was no one left to run. The buzz of the phone jolted her. A message from her DOJ contact appeared. "Green light confirmed. Support with 4 tomorrow night. 1 shot. Be careful." Dana set the phone down on the table, drew a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "They won't bury anyone else." The next evening, a few miles east of Relay 9, in the heart of the dark desert, an SUV and a pickup truck waited silently. The DOJ team moved like shadows in their black gear, Rob Tyrrell and Agents Wolf and Monroe. Everyone was quiet, every weapon loaded, every glance sharp. Dana thought again about the bait message she'd sent to Draw Brewer and the unknown courier. "Old files ready, must move before audit, usual place, no delays." Brewer had replied 20 minutes later. 218 it is, 1 extra joining, keep it clean." It was now 21:44. The sky was pitch black, lit only by the stars. Everyone checked their earpieces. Rob Tyrrell brushed Dana's shoulder lightly with his. A look that simply meant ready. The only thing betraying Dana's adrenaline was the faint tremor in her right hand. She drew a long breath. "When they arrive, everyone in position." Minutes passed. Then a low, muffled engine hum rose from the desert. First came the dust cloud, then headlights. Brewer's tan SUV stopped at the edge of the dirt road. He sat for a moment staring out the window. Then the door opened. Wearing a black cap and tan jacket, he stepped out, moving slowly into the shadows, scanning the area. Every movement was measured, confident he belonged here, but cautious. 2 minutes later, the second vehicle appeared. This time, an old dust-covered pickup with no plates. From it climbed a broad-shouldered, middle-aged man, a military duffel slung over one shoulder. Through the telescopic lens, Dana watched his face. Dark hair, hard features, unfamiliar, yet disturbingly familiar. Brewer and the courier met in front of the shack. Both kept their voices low, but even through static, Wolf's mic caught fragments. Audit's not clean. Burn the rest. Who torched your car? Did what had to be done. Dana wasn't waiting anymore. She leaned toward her radio. Now, Tieran lunged forward, raising his weapon. US Marshals, don't move! The others burst from the darkness, Wolf and Monroe flanking them with rifles at the ready. Brewer froze, arms half raised, but the courier reflexively hurled the duffel and bolted north. Runner! Wolf shouted. Tieran tore after him, sand crunching and spraying underfoot, his breath sharp in the cold air. The courier was shockingly fast, but stumbled climbing a ridge. Tieran tackled him hard, slamming him into the dirt. A cloud of dust rose, then the click of cuffs, snapping shut. Dana approached Brewer slowly. Len Brewer, you're under arrest for the murder of Rachel Prescott, obstruction of justice, and falsification of federal records. There was no anger or surprise in Brewer's face, just a contemptuous smirk. You got further than I expected, he said. Dana stared into his eyes. On the trail you left behind. Brewer extended his hands calmly. You still don't know everything. The court will, Dana replied, flipping him and cuffing his wrists. That night, the courier was loaded into an FBI truck with his duffel. Inside were documents and tapes, evidence of years of covert operations, forged records, lists of names crossed in red, Rachel Prescott's name circled twice, an old VHS tape, a shattered badge, everything. The whole chain of silence had finally come undone. By morning, as Brewer sat in custody, Dana assembled the evidence. The DOJ drafted charges within hours. Conspiracy, destruction of official records, second-degree murder. The court ordered Brewer held without bail the next day. The courier faced the same. Sanders gave his statement in a secure facility. His testimony led to 2 more former DHS employees being arrested. Those who'd erased the archives, buried the records, and tried to erase Rachel herself were now named, one by one. The story was nearly over, but not yet for Rachel. When Dana sat across from Brewer in the interrogation room, the air was heavy and electric. Brewer's hands lay flat on the table, cuffed, the metal glinting against his wrists. That familiar, mocking smile still sat on his face. It's over, Dana said. The game's over. Brewer lowered his head, letting out a dry, contemptuous laugh. You think it's over, but this is only a layer. You can't go that deep. Dana dropped the thick file onto the table. She pulled out the documents from the duffel, copies of the VHS tape, Rachel's shattered watch, and a bullet casing. One by one, she laid them out like heavy seals on the table. If I don't go deeper, they will, Dana said. Talk now, or these names, these faces, and every red X in that book will drag you straight to the grave. For the first time, Brewer's eyes darkened. He stared at the file in silence, then slowly raised his head. You didn't have it in you before, he said softly, but now you really have become her. Dana leaned closer. Rachel's blood isn't dry here yet. Who's behind it? Pull back the last curtain. Surprise me. Brewer took a deep breath. The silence stretched for nearly a minute, then his eyes locked on hers. Rachel wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time, he said. She listened to the wrong man, followed the wrong plan. What everybody calls the cartels, it's not what you think. And that man, he's still alive. Dana's heart skipped. Who? Brewer bit his lip and finally whispered, R.J. Manning. A chill ran down Dana's spine, the name of the man at DOJ who had opened the files for her. What the hell are you talking about? He's the one who authorized this investigation. Exactly, Brewer said. You're cleaning up the mess he made. He's playing you against them. You won't believe me, but listen. Rachel reached him too. When Manning asked to meet her, she was already marked, just like the others. In a flash, Dana remembered the first motel phone call, the anonymous envelope, the notes that always pointed her the right way at just the right time. Everything had been too convenient. Every stone turning at exactly the right moment. The second she left the room, she dialed the special line registered under a false name at DOJ. Manning, meet me now. We have things to talk about. After a short silence, that familiar, calm voice answered. You've gone too far, Dana. I didn't expect you to get this far, but maybe it's time. Location, an abandoned hangar outside El Paso. When Dana arrived, the place was empty except for a table, 2 chairs, and Manning. No tie, jacket tossed on the chair, sleeves rolled up. He looked relaxed, but his eyes said otherwise. You surprised me, Manning said. You really finished it. You came all the way. Dana stepped to the far end of the table. You killed Rachel. You planned all of it. Every red X in those files passed through your hands. Manning tilted his head slightly. Then he reached into his jacket and produced a small, sealed cylindrical envelope. Take this, he said. Your answer's inside. Dana snatched it, opened it. Out fell an old Polaroid. Rachel Prescott stood next to Manning, her face a mix of fear and determination. Behind them, the grey concrete walls of Relay 9 loomed. On the back of the photo, a short note. Some are buried long before they die. Dana lifted her head. What does this mean? Manning leaned back in his chair, hands clasped behind his neck. What killed her wasn't the finger on the trigger. What killed her was what needed silencing. Everyone stayed quiet. Sanders, Brewer, because the real enemy wasn't us. The real enemy was never visible. Who are you? Dana asked, her voice trembling. Manning smiled. I'm the most honest lie in the room. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed outside. DOJ agents, federal marshals, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. One held a phone, another was shouting into a radio. When Dana turned, one of them yelled, R.J. Manning! Died 10 years ago! Documented! Car bomb! Dana's eyes widened like ice. She spun back to the table, but Manning was gone. The chair lay tipped over, and on the table was only half the sealed envelope. The other half, with Rachel's photo, was nothing but ash, and in the air lingered a faint metallic scent of decay. He had vanished, leaving behind only silence. Dana crouched slowly, picking up the remaining seal. It bore an old DHS logo, but the name beneath was redacted. That's when she realized Manning wasn't a name. He was a protocol, a method, a shadow. The story was over, but she understood now that it was only the curtain falling on one act. The real war was just beginning. In the end, Rachel's death had been exposed. The perpetrators stood trial. Brewer was convicted. Her body was returned to her family. And at her graveside, the truth was finally spoken aloud. The public read about it as a federal story of courage, and everyone believed Rachel's name had been honoured. But Dana, still holding that half-burned seal in her back pocket, knew better. There was no end to this game, because the real culprit was never a name. It was the system, and the system was still there. The next morning, Dana resigned her post. She no longer wore a badge, but she carried something else. Rachel's cracked watch still in her pocket. and it was still stopped at 1916. At the cemetery, Dana left flowers at Rachel's headstone and whispered, "You stayed silent, but I won't." She turned her back and walked toward the sun.